bad shape. The doctors, they don't know. I have to appoint an acting base commander. Someone with character. Someone like you. McHale narrowed his eyes. Captain, you must be kidding. I'm a saltwater skipper. I'd be no good behind a desk. I insist. Binghamton wheezed. And to help you, I'm appointing Ensign Parker as your acting executive officer. Beside McHale, Ensign Charles Parker, a man whose coordination was once compared to a newborn giraffe on ice, beamed. With pride. Oh boy, did you hear that, Skipper? Acting exec. You won't regret this, Captain. Binghamton suppressed a smile. I know I won't. Now out. Out. Go take command. Within an hour, the headquarters of Teratupa had undergone a radical transformation. McHale sat behind the big desk, his feet up, while the crew of the PT-73 treated the office like a clubhouse. Chief, McHale shouted into the phone. The sinks are plugged? What do you want a get-well card? Get a plunger. Skip, Gruber shouted, burst into the room. The boys found the garter belts, but we've also got to scramble. The PT-73 is hot on the tail of A. Nip sub. And Parker. McHale turned to his ensign, who was currently tangled in 3 different telephone cords. The Seabees are building an air raid shelter in the middle of the rifle range. Tell them to keep there. Heads down. It was glorious chaos. Moonshine was being distilled in the laundry. Hula girls, who had mysteriously appeared from a neighboring island, were rehearsing in the air raid shelter, and the supply list now included 3 cases of gin and a lawnmower. But the party was cut short by the roar of an airplane engine. Admiral Iron Pants Rafferty had arrived. Chapter 3. The Hula Girl Gambit. Admiral Rafferty was a man who believed that if a sailor wasn't standing at attention, he was probably dead. When he stepped off the plane, he was met by McHale and a very starched and very nervous Ensign Parker. Welcome to Teratupa, sir, McHale said, saluting with a practiced ease that hid the fact that his pockets were full of illegal poker chips. At ease, Rafferty barked. Where is Binghamton? I heard he was in the hospital. Terrible illness, sir, McHale lied smoothly. Hallucinations. He thinks he sees girls everywhere. It's the combat fatigue. Meanwhile, back at the infirmary, Binghamton was vibrating with excitement. He had heard the Admiral's plane. Now, Carpenter, now we strike. We go to the Admiral and show him the mess McHale has made. The hula, girls, the gambling. It's perfect. But McHale was 3 steps ahead. As Binghamton and Carpenter rushed toward the air raid shelter to expose the orgy, they found nothing but a group of CBs digging a very deep hole. The hula girls had been relocated to the laundry and then to the closet in Binghamton's own office. When Binghamton burst into his office with the Admiral screaming, "Look in the closet. Look at the disgrace," he opened the door to find a nurse in a bathing suit. Lieutenant Wilson? Binghamton blinked. What are you doing in my closet? The captain sent me here to wait for a swim, sir, she said, following McHale's secret instructions to the letter. Admiral Rafferty turned to Binghamton, his face turning a shade of purple, usually reserved for tropical fruit. Binghamton, you are in a seaman's uniform. You're screaming about hula girls in laundry shacks. And you're hiding nurses in your closet. McHale was right. You're delirious. Get back to bed. But, Admiral, Binghamton wailed as he was dragged away by medics. It was a trap. The alligator. The girls. Cap it finito. Chapter 4. The Sultan and the Princesses. A week later, Binghamton was back in power. Having convinced the medical board that his hallucinations were merely a reaction to a bad batch of quinine, he was determined to regain his dignity. And a visit from the Sultan of Marami was the perfect opportunity. The Sultan and his 3 daughters are arriving. Binghamton lectured McHale. The Admiral wants us to go all out. I want this base 100% in order, and that means you and your Riffraff are restricted to Aku Aku Island. But, sir, McHale protested, there's nothing on Aku Aku but sand and seagulls. Exactly. Move. However, fate and a failing engine on the Sultan's plane intervened. The Sultan was forced to ditch near the 73 boat's position. McHale, ever the opportunist, rescued the Sultan and his daughters. Wowie, wow, wow, wow. Gruber whispered as the three princesses stepped onto the boat. Silence, you dog, the Sultan roared. The next man who dares to debase the dignity of the princesses will answer to me. By the time they reached the main base, the Sultan was charmed by McHale. A most efficient officer, he told a fuming Binghamton. He even let me steer the boat. Binghamton, desperate to reclaim the spotlight, invited the Sultan to a grand dinner. But he made a fatal error. He restricted the crew again. To get back at him, the crew decided to play a ceremonial trick. When the dinner began, the princesses were missing. The crew, specifically Parker, Gruber, and Christie, had borrowed some of the princesses' veils and robes. They performed a traditional Morani dance that involved a lot of clumsy stumbling and a suspicious amount of hair on the princesses' legs. Binghamton, convinced he was witnessing an impostor, grabbed one of the dancers. I've got you, you phony Balinese bunny. He ripped off the veil to reveal Ensign Parker in a wig. The Sultan rose, trembling with rage. You have insulted my blood. I will raid your Washington. Stupid infidel. Binghamton stood frozen as the Sultan marched out. Why, me? He whispered to the ceiling. Why is it always me? Chapter 5. The Jinx and the Ghost of PT-13. Binghamton's next plan involved psychological warfare. He discovered a dusty file claiming that the PT-73 was originally the PT-13, a Jinx boat that had lost 2 crews to mysterious explosions. We'll scare them off the boat, Binghamton told Carpenter. They're superstitious sailors. They'll beg for a transfer to the North Pole. The crew did indeed get spooked. Strange noises began emanating from the hull at night. Engines started by themselves. Lights flickered. Parker was convinced the ghost of a drowned cook was haunting the galley. It's a jinx, Skip. Parker cried. We're living on borrowed time. McHale, however, found a wire leading from the boat to Binghamton's shack. So, Lee Bottom wants to play ghost, does he? McHale grinned. All right, boys, let's give him a haunting he won't forget. That night, the base was silent. Suddenly, the air was filled with low, mournful wailing. A glowing figure appeared outside Binghamton's window. Binghamton, the ghost moaned. We have come back from the grave. The ghost of PT-13. Binghamton bolted upright, his teeth chattering. McHale, is that you? Stop this. I order you to stop. We want the transfers. Wally, the ghost of Admiral Rogers, actually Christie and a lot of flour on his sheet, boomed. Give us the signed transfer papers, or we take you to the locker. Davy Jones' locker. Binghamton, utterly terrified, threw the papers out the window. The ghosts vanished, taking the papers with them. The next morning, McHale presented the found papers to Binghamton, who was so rattled he accidentally signed a requisition for 300 gallons of medicinal, brandy for the crew. Chapter 6. The Trial of Sidney the Alligator. Perhaps the most absurd chapter in the history of Taratupa began with a missing wallet. Binghamton had marked 9 $100 bills and accidentally dropped his wallet near the 73 boat, hoping to catch McHale in an act of theft.